Hello, dear viewers. Today's story will delve into the tale of how a Chinese intelligence officer, who relocated to New York, established the largest car theft ring in American history. Over the course of 10 years, his gang and syndicate managed to steal thousands of cars without leaving a trace for law enforcement. But the cars seemed to vanish into thin air. Yet, there was something leading the operation. Why would a Chinese intelligence officer end up leading a car theft ring in New York? Let's find out in this video. Upon arriving in New York City, we all know it's one of the most affluent cities on the planet, with the largest concentration of wealthy individuals residing here. Catering to these affluent individuals, luxury cars abound, making New York City the epicenter of luxury car ownership in the United States. So, in 1999, a massive surge in car thefts hit New York City. Imagine 48 high-end cars being stolen within just 1 month, and they vanished without a trace. These thefts occurred swiftly and almost invisibly, with car alarms being disabled calmly before the cars were driven away. No specific area was targeted. The thieves struck everywhere, from shopping centers to parking lots. The peculiar thing was that none of these stolen cars resurfaced as usual. The stolen cars, when spotted, were missing their expensive parts. The thieves had to dismantle them and sell the parts individually because they couldn't sell a stolen luxury car intact in the United States. However, the cars stolen by this syndicate simply disappeared, leaving no trace behind. Law enforcement was baffled, as they couldn't figure out how these vehicles were being disposed of on such a large scale. This led investigators to believe that the stolen cars were being exported, likely taken out of the country. The only suitable place for exporting a large number of cars would be the bustling ports of New York. With this hypothesis, a task force from the New York Police Department headed to the ports to conduct an investigation, but they found no suspicious activity. At that point, the NYPD began to feel overwhelmed or like they were facing a formidable force, perhaps an organized crime syndicate. But interestingly, the mastermind behind all these operations wasn't an American. This person was identified as Ming Dingjiang. He was once an intelligence officer in the Chinese military but was dishonorably discharged in 1990. He then moved to a highly affluent city in China where there was a high demand for luxury cars. With his keen business acumen, Jiang realized that these types of cars had no market in China, presenting him with an opportunity to profit. Afterwards, I decided to contact the gangs in the upper echelon to negotiate a business deal with the leaders of these gangs. I informed them that I used to be an intelligence officer in the military and had experience in smuggling. Given my knowledge of security operations and the strengths of law enforcement, I convinced the triad leaders that I could bring goods from abroad, and they could sell them in China through their network. As soon as they saw how lucrative the deal could be, the triad leaders were extremely interested because they all knew that goods were highly valued in China at that time. Using this leverage, buying a shipment of foreign goods for $100,000 and selling it in China for $200,000, and even agreeing during negotiations to a 40% profit for myself and 60% for the gangs. And so, the triad leaders agreed to invest $500,000 to establish their own group and start conducting clandestine operations in New York City, where there was a demand for luxury goods. From the outset, I utilized my military intelligence skills that I had learned in my previous intelligence work. I adopted a false identity for immigration and in the U.S., going by the name Kenny. I, John, posed as an immigrant struggling against Beijing's policies, which garnered sympathy from the locals. Zhang's first significant purchase upon arrival was a second-hand Nissan Altima, a very ordinary car in this neighborhood, to maintain a low profile. This was something that Zhang, now Kenny, wanted. He didn't want to appear as a wealthy individual. Right from the start, Zhang brought along an accomplice named Chow to act as his right-hand man. They faced the challenge of hiding the purchased cars until they could be shipped to China. But this required meeting certain conditions. Firstly, it had to be far from any surveillance. Secondly, it had to be in a low-key area with minimal issues or criminal activity, meaning an area where law enforcement attention was scarce. However, finding such a place was quite difficult in this city, known for its high crime rate. After some research, Zhang and Chao found a suitable warehouse. Now, they wanted to expand this operation. So, Zhang and Chao established a front company called Zhang. This was to mitigate risks. If there were any investigations into this company, the authorities wouldn't be able to trace it back to the mastermind. To kickstart the plan, Zhang needed a team, so he hired skilled individuals from China, as only they possessed the necessary capabilities. Additionally, Zhang could communicate with them in their native language to avoid detection. Once they secured the necessary warehouse, the first order of business for this group was to transform it into a pseudo-food processing facility. Zhang's resourcefulness came into play, setting up a small food processing plant and placing it at the front of the warehouse so that anyone looking in would immediately think it was just a food company. Afterwards, I decided to contact the gangs in the upper echelons to negotiate a business deal with the leaders of these gangs. I disclosed that I had previously served as an intelligence officer in the military and had experience in smuggling. Leveraging my knowledge of security operations and the strengths of law enforcement, I persuaded the triad leaders that I could import goods from abroad, and they could sell them in China through their network. Upon realizing how lucrative the deal could be, the triad leaders were extremely interested, as they were aware of the high demand and prices for foreign goods in China at that time. In this manner, by purchasing foreign goods at a cost of $100,000 and selling them in China for $200,000, and even agreeing during negotiations to a profit split of 40% for myself and 60% for the gangs, the triad leaders saw it as an opportunity to establish their own group and commence clandestine operations in New York City, where luxury goods were highly sought after. Right from the start, I utilized my military intelligence background to my advantage, adopting a false persona for immigration purposes in the U.S., using the alias Kenny. I portrayed myself as an immigrant fighting against Beijing's policies, garnering sympathy from the locals. My first significant purchase upon arrival was a modest Nissan Altima, chosen deliberately to avoid drawing attention as a wealthy individual. Additionally, I brought along an accomplice named Chao to act as my right-hand man. Together, we embarked on the challenge of concealing the purchased vehicles until they could be shipped to China. However, this required meeting certain conditions, such as ensuring the location was far from surveillance and in a low-key area with minimal criminal activity. After some research, we found a suitable warehouse. Now, to further expand our operation, we established a front company called Zhang. This was done to mitigate risks. In case of any investigation into the company, the authorities wouldn't be able to trace it back to us. To execute our plan, I needed a team, so I recruited skilled individuals from China, as only they possessed the necessary capabilities. Moreover, I could communicate with them in their native language to avoid detection. With the necessary warehouse secured, the first task for our group was to transform it into a pseudo-food processing facility. We strategically placed food processing equipment at the front of the warehouse to maintain the facade of a legitimate business. The shopping centers lit up the snake-like roads leading to the testing grounds and sometimes even the racecourse. Tuan's mastery of this chow cap process was minute and meticulous, a testament to Mario's skills. Mario could choose any car he wanted, whenever and wherever. Once he identified the target vehicle, Mario would advance to the door, break the window, and gain entry to the car through the broken window rather than through the door, as breaking the lock would trigger the car's alarm, rendering it useless, and then the car would not start. One of Mario's most crucial skills was using the car's features to bypass the security system. He would interface well with the car's systems and reprogram it for ignition by conventional means. Mario was so adept that he could accomplish this in under a minute. After disabling the car's security system, Mario would instruct one of his associates to drive the car to a safe location. They often took the cars to a secure parking lot in a safe neighborhood with many cars around to divert attention away from the chosen car. As you know, stolen cars are often sold for parts, so for someone as cautious as Mario, safety was always paramount. The gang's mechanics would then dismantle the stolen car, removing any identifiable parts. Consequently, if the owner reported a stolen car and alerted the police, the tracking device would be activated. In such situations, the gang's mechanics would leave the vehicle for 2 days. If the car remained untouched for 2 days, it meant that the police were not actively searching for it, and the gang could retrieve and resell the car. Of course, those involved in this process were highly disciplined, ensuring that no one followed them. Everyone adhered strictly to the gang's rules. This individual was very resourceful and adaptable, drawing on their experience from years as a special operations intelligence officer to become a mastermind. This was evident in their meticulous planning. They would only bring cars to their hideouts or their drug distribution centers for a short period, avoiding any suspicion. Mario wouldn't want anyone to know about the true purpose of his hideouts. Only he and the leader knew about the clandestine activities of this hideout. After the mechanic parked the vehicle in the designated location, the leader would come and put the vehicle in the hideout. It seemed like the end of the devilish process, but there was still one final comprehensive check to ensure that the police wouldn't trace these vehicles. The leader would survey the area around the hideout again. If there were any suspicious vehicles, he would make circles in the area, making them believe they were being monitored. And surveillance activities were carried out in 2 ways. The first was through external cameras installed around the hideout, and the second was through another vehicle that would circle the area, ready to take action in case the police were close by. Once the area was deemed safe and clear of threats, the leader would return to the hideout to transport the vehicles. The boss had executed all these complex maneuvers to ensure that everything went according to plan. Once the stolen cars were in the hideout, a team of Chinese experts would take over, preparing the vehicles for transportation. The boss wanted them to reach China in the best possible condition, as if they were fresh off the assembly line. In fact, the mechanics, who were also experts, would inspect the vehicles and fix any malfunctions. They would repair damaged locks, reprogram the car's computer, and finally, polish the cars to make them look brand new. Once these Chinese operatives finished their work, it was time to prepare for transport back to China. John would start by loading these cars onto the container ships he had brought. Then, John's gang would load a significant amount of weight onto the container ship and forge shipping documents to make it appear as if the container held legitimate food products. This way, the weight of the actual food items would match the weight of the stolen cars. Everything had to be done with extreme precision to avoid suspicion. After the container ship left the hideout, the cars would be transported directly to the port. But John would continue to surprise us with his cunning. He knew that law enforcement agencies would search for the cars and the shipping containers to recover the stolen vehicles, especially as the rate of car thefts increased. So, he simply switched the transport teams, sending the stolen cars to the farthest port ahead of time. They would be transported to a small port near New York, where they would then be shipped across the country to California. California ports were close to China, as they were on the western side of the United States. At a California port, the stolen luxury cars that had been hijacked were loaded onto a ship. Though it appeared to be a regular cargo ship, it had an extra layer of protection for the cars. This ship was not headed directly to China, but it followed a different route. Along the way, it encountered another ship, and the stolen cars were transferred to the second ship, which was bound for China. Naturally, the crew of this second ship, as well as the ship's owner, were aware of the truth about these stolen cars. They also had a detailed inventory of the cars in the shipment. Thus, John continued to operate his gang for many years without detection. Over the course of 5 years, he and his gang had hijacked thousands of cars from New York. Law enforcement agencies were extremely frustrated because there were so many missing cars, seemingly without a trace. They couldn't apprehend or find any evidence that could lead them to John's gang. Despite the large number of stolen cars and the substantial monetary value involved, John had amassed a fortune from this operation. However, the demand for these vehicles in China had not diminished. In fact, it had increased, surpassing even John's capabilities. To meet the growing demand for exported cars, John's gang began to take bolder actions, targeting major car dealerships in China, where they could steal multiple luxury cars at once. John reconvened with his team and Marian targeted the car dealerships. Mario then went to one of the car dealerships in New York to pose as a customer interested in test driving cars. While conversing with the salesperson, he noticed the location of the key box inside the dealership. It was a fixed box on the wall inside the manager's office. After thanking the salesperson and leaving, Mario returned that evening. By now, the dealership was closed, and the cars were locked up for the night. Using his lockpicking skills, he quietly broke in and went straight to the manager's office. Mario's objective was none other than the key box containing the keys to the cars in the showroom. He removed the keys from the box. These were the keys to the showroom cars. While his accomplices waited outside, Mario quickly distributed the keys to the 7 members of his team, and each took a set of keys and went in different directions. This entire process took only 3 minutes. By this time, the alarm had been triggered, and an electronic message had been sent to the police. Mario and his accomplices had disappeared along with the showroom keys worth $100,000. However, not everything went smoothly. One of the 7 sets of keys encountered an accident, which was a significant issue. The police arrived at the accident scene or discovered the keys were stolen, so they apprehended Mario and brought him in for questioning. With some pressure, the apprehended accomplice revealed Mario and Din's involvement to the police. Now the FBI stepped up surveillance on the duo. Because the investigative agency had received information from the apprehended associate, Din was the mastermind behind these activities. The FBI continued their surveillance for a while, and eventually, they led them to the hideout. The police parked their cars a distance from the hideout and began monitoring the situation to see what would unfold inside. The investigators were unaware that the owner of the hideout was Chow. He had been observing the surveillance across the entire neighborhood surrounding the hideout. He quickly realized that the surveillance vehicles belonged to law enforcement, as they were monitoring the hideout. Knowing this, he remained calm and silently prepared for the inevitable, just as he had planned. Of course, the investigators would not enter the hideout, as they had been monitoring the area and gathering substantial evidence. During this time, they did not introduce any new cars into the hideout, but there were still some cars left inside along with the necessary equipment and tools used to repair the stolen cars. Therefore, he had to move all those cars and tools out of the hideout. Naturally, at this point, the entire area was under police surveillance. But with the spy experience of Chow, he could still manage the situation. Chow placed several decoy cars inside the hideout, and then he moved all the stolen cars and his equipment out of there. Simultaneously, he informed the police through a fake company announcement that they were transporting goods because it seemed like the hideout was a food warehouse. Thus, Chow brought out all the cars and tools from the hideout in front of the police. The police were unaware that evidence of their crime was being transported right in front of them because they didn't know that Chow's gang had initiated the action. Nevertheless, Chow brought out all the essential items related to his work, and when the police arrived the next day, they found nothing incriminating. At this point, the police were extremely surprised, so they decided to act. They raided the hideout and the place of residence, but they found nothing. At this point, the investigators realized that they had been deceived during surveillance. Even throughout this surveillance period, Chow had never appeared in front of them, so the police didn't know who the mastermind was or what his role was in all of this. Then, the police focused all their attention and resources to confirm all of these movements. Initially, the investigators were thinking of apprehending him, but later they thought better of it and decided to continue monitoring him instead because they knew they needed to apprehend the ringleader and the key members of the gang to end the operation entirely. During the surveillance of the hideout, the police intercepted conversations of Chow, and they heard similar questions in many of his conversations, such as whether the rice supply was still safe, when they would return to their work, and Chow always replied, "I don't know." The agents believed that those asking these questions were associates of Chow in the smuggling operation and the people working in the hideout. After months of surveillance, they finally intercepted an important contact with Chow. This person's name was Kenny, and they knew that it was Zhang. Kenny told Chow, "I've returned, and we can place an order for 260 units. But who this mysterious person was, they couldn't figure out. Kenny's words were cryptic, but maybe he knew that the police were monitoring them. Kenny was one of the most cautious individuals in every detail. The police deduced that 90% of what he said referred to 260 stolen cars. So the investigators suspected that he was the mastermind behind the gang and that he wanted to resume the smuggling operation once again. At this point, the police realized that not only was the leader cautious, but he also used facial expressions to give orders. Moreover, he discarded the phone immediately after calling, so the police couldn't trace the phone number or his location. Kenny also ordered all members of his gang to change their phone numbers frequently, making the monitoring process more challenging for the agents. Because tapping certain phones required approval from a court, whenever these individuals changed their phone numbers or needed a new approval, the agents suspected a method to find out the new phone numbers of the gang members. The police monitored the phone calls of their relatives. For example, they often called their parents. Therefore, through these calls, the police could quickly find out their new phone numbers. After finding the new phone numbers of the suspects, the police, through various means, managed to obtain the phone numbers of other gang members. This process was extremely tedious but ultimately rewarding. At this point, the investigators became more adept. While Chow might have been cautious and not let any clues slip, his accomplices were not as careful. For instance, his Chinese accomplices even openly discussed their dining plans over the phone, making it easy for the police to track them. The investigators capitalized on this information and sent an undercover officer to the restaurant that Chow and his associates frequented. For the first time, the police had the opportunity to observe the mastermind up close, which provided a wealth of deception to them over the past year. At this point, the undercover police could overhear their conversation. While the two were discussing a new shipment that they were planning to rent, these undercover officers succeeded in memorizing the location of that shipment because of their conversation. The investigators immediately acted on this lead. However, this time, their approach would be different from before. Chow didn't want any police presence in the area, so everything was carefully orchestrated to ensure that the operation remained safe for all members involved. What the police did was install surveillance cameras on the buildings surrounding the area. These cameras would cover every angle of the location. They also successfully installed tracking devices on the cars, as these were left with valets by their owners for safekeeping. Mario Lobet smoothly bribed one of the valets at this location. He offered the valet $500 for each car key they could retrieve from the valet's booth. This amount was very attractive to the valet, considering his low salary. After some persuasion, the valet agreed to the deal. Now, Chow's team member could select multiple cars from the valet at once. So, they arranged a meeting with the valet. Mario Lobet and his accomplice would come there and take the car keys from the valet, then return them to him later, making it seem like a routine operation and avoiding any suspicion. That night, Chow's gang managed to retrieve the stolen cars from the valet's booth without raising any alarms. After a while, the workers at the valet noticed the unconscious valet lying under the booth, so they called the police. When the police arrived at the valet and began checking the new inventory of cars, they indeed found the stolen cars present in the inventory. But as we mentioned, these masterminds planned to wait for 2 days after moving the stolen cars before notifying the rest of the gang to avoid being tracked with the new inventory. However, the volume of orders became overwhelming, and executing everything too hastily was a mistake they had made before. This led the masterminds to gradually lose their vigilance. Consequently, all the stolen cars from the valet were meticulously checked and locked up in the warehouse. One of these cars may have been equipped with a tracking device. Local police were alerted by one of the concerned car owners, and a local police officer was dispatched to the warehouse location. This local officer was unaware of the secret investigation underway. Meanwhile, the investigators on the other side were monitoring the area through surveillance cameras, and as soon as they saw the local police officer, they knew their cover would be blown. However, they had no choice as the police officer prepared to enter the warehouse. The individuals lingering inside suddenly fled, surely having spotted him from their surveillance cameras. When the investigators saw these individuals fleeing, they knew they had to act swiftly. This was the perfect moment to intervene and initiate arrests with their team. At this point, the specialized investigative unit arrested the individuals lingering inside the warehouse, but the mastermind, who they knew was the key figure, was not present, and the operatives also sensed the impending raid, so they fled. Fortunately, over time, they had been able to pinpoint the location of Zhang's residence. Therefore, the police kept surveillance on him from a distance for 24 hours. When the individuals lingering in the warehouse were arrested, the surveillance team also received confirmation and immediately apprehended him. Zhang was arrested that night as he was preparing to flee his home. After being quietly interrogated by the police, it was revealed that his real name was not Zhang, but Min Din. At this point, the police learned about his past military intelligence background in China. They now understood why Zhang's gang had been able to operate for the past 5 years without detection. While the arrest operation was very successful, the police could not determine whether these individuals were operating solely in the United States or had been transferred to another country. Ultimately, Zhang confessed his criminal network to the police. It seemed the police couldn't prosecute him directly because he hadn't committed the crimes himself. He was later sentenced to only 15 years, which was considered a lenient sentence considering that during those 15 years, he had stolen thousands of cars, and the police estimated Zhang's profits exceeded $40 million, equivalent to over $75,000 a day. However, U.S. authorities couldn't recover this money because Zhang had stashed it in China, not in any U.S. bank. Nevertheless, Zhang was still apprehended by the police, but he could potentially live comfortably after his release. And thus concludes the remarkable and enigmatic tale of Min Din Zhang, a Chinese military intelligence officer who built an empire of car theft that shook New York. What do you think of this character? Let's discuss in the comments section below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content. See you in the next video. Bye.